I'm Steve Orr, former Australian cricket captain. This week's story is about a good friend of mine, Formula One driver Mark Webber. Mark is one of the few Australians to break into the elite world of the F1 circuit, but success didn't come easily. Tonight, for the first time, he shares a remarkable untold story of those who helped get him there, and opens a window on the politics and pitfalls of such a high-octane career. Buckle up, it's a wild ride.
I've had sportsmen and women sit in my Formula One car and they go, how the hell can you drive in this position? It's horrible. Your eye line is very low, sort of knee-level height. I mean, it's a very claustrophobic environment, especially for a big guy like me. I am not an F1 driver size. I picked the wrong sport. You can't see that well the opposition. You know, obviously on TV we see everything. Yeah, oh God, yeah, that's how it is. But obviously in the car, you put a helmet on, you've got a letterbox.
They lose litres of fluid out of their body in that 40-degree heat race, where you've got, 70 laps of pounding around with almost you can't breathe in the cockpit.
Everything happens within a split second, with 300 plus kilometres an hour. So a little mistake is a big mistake.
G-forces, the pressure on the neck, trying to hold your neck in the fast corners for long periods of time. You can hear the plank of the wood touching, like it's kissing the ground at high speed. You can nearly smell that because your senses are so elevated. Your vision and your smell is on such a high level because of testosterone and your awareness. Everything's off the charts. Everything is bespoke towards a brutal, high-speed weapon.
It's a very big challenge to come from Australia, the furthest part away from where Grand Prix racing really is. You had to be somebody special. Jack Brabham was such a man. Alan Jones won the World Championship. And then Mark Webber came along and really woke the whole place up again.
After 130 races, there was no holding back the emotion as Mark Webber won the German Grand Prix.
The Australian was in front from start to finish in the Spanish Grand Prix.
Formula One is a billion-dollar business, not just a sport. Rock star drivers, glitz, glamour, speed, danger, you name it, it's got it all. And only 20 or so available seats that every driver in the world wants to get into.
Australia's Mark Webber has claimed his first Formula One victory of the year by winning the Monaco Grand Prix.
He won 9 Grand Prix, he was a leading Formula One driver, but when you get different nationalities, when you've got more money than you can poke a stick at, egos that you can't jump over, it's always going to be a nice melting pot for aggravation.
Webber's teammate Sebastian Vettel disobeyed team orders and overtook the Australian to win the race.
Formula One is absolutely a fight to the death. It is very political. It doesn't take any prisoners. I think Mark, probably now that he's out of the so-say Piranha Club, probably has time to reflect and perhaps unleash some of his feelings that he couldn't unleash when he was actually active in the paddock.
What time does the function start?
Oh, it's 4.
When you're outside the sport, you see all of the lights and I suppose the glitz and the glamour. What's in front of what we call the bullshit boards, behind what goes on behind, then you start to see there's actually just so much personal interest in certain decisions, and how, and you're just like, wow, that's probably not in the best interest of the sport.
We've got dinner with Porsche drivers, and then this NBC interview. There are hidden agendas, people are doing it for the wrong reasons, and the drivers become a pawn in the game, really. It just sort of dawned on us, it's not so much about sport anymore.
I just happened to be one of the jokers in the game, My earliest memory of Formula One was around 10, at home in Queanbeyan, watching it on TV, and Dad would come and wake me up for the start. Parents obviously do shape their kids' lives at that early age, and my father definitely did that with me.
I've always enjoyed motor racing. Jack Brabham was my hero. It's like a drug, but an expensive drug, but not illegal. I did take him to the Adelaide Grand Prix for his first one.
And I just couldn't believe there was a human in that car. And I was just like, that thing is an absolute missile, and these guys are superhuman.
He didn't start the go-karts until he was 13. He was able to run at the front pretty early and pretty quickly. So I thought, well, I'll just see how we go with the motor racing dream. With him still being at school, we weren't able to practice very much. Also, didn't have a lot of money.
The support that I had from my parents was incredible. You know, this was a big family decision, obviously, it's not taken lightly.
From a mother's point of view, you worry about them. But it was certainly nerve-wracking. But there was worse to come.
Place usually the times I was on.
Yes, you're quite slow, aren't you?
We're all budding young drivers wanting to establish ourselves in motor racing. Really, you need those contacts to be able to really open doors and talk to people that you need to, and Ann was that person for Mark.
I was working in the motor racing world ever since I left school, really. First as a journalist. I emigrated out to Australia in the early 90s. I started to work for the Formula Ford Association, looking after their press work, and that's how I actually met Mark. I remember him having very sunburnt brown forearms, of like, what on earth made me notice that? And I just thought he was cheeky as well.
Dad approached her to try and put some sponsorship proposals together because we were in our first season of racing.
They liked what they saw and they sponsored him, but they said the condition was that I was to manage him. So I was like, okay. This was a document that I actually scribbled together to try and come up with a plan of how we got Mark from Queanbeyan to Formula One. My advice to Mark was to get you over to Europe and, yeah, throw you in with the wolves, basically, so there you go.
What's the competition like over here compared to Australia?
Yeah, it's a lot stronger over here for sure. Annie didn't have much doubt, no. I mean, she was, very much a very, strong driving force. I think, she believed I could do it. So did I.
He punches the air with delight. It's the 21-year-old Australian who takes the checkered flag.
Annie and I think when we left here, there was a lot of people, I'll be back 6 months, give them 1 year. She was, very much a dog with a bone, and come on, let's bring these teams and let's do this and let's do that. So she was super tenacious.
When he did go overseas, I struggled a lot because, I thought, God, 19 is going over there, into what? What's he going to do?
Mark's and my relationship was definitely a partnership. Teammates, call it what you want, from very, very early on. We just had this kind of bond.
The relationship with Anne, certainly got more serious, and we were, in a relationship as such. So, that was, it was good.
I don't know a great deal of history about Anne and Mark in that world. All I know is that obviously she took advantage of him. And I tell her that every time I see her, but she's been a terrific part of his career.
Mum might have had a problem with the age difference, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to close in on Annie, but she's still the same age gap. But I think that at the time probably Mum wasn't maybe a massive fan of that.
In the beginning, it was pretty rocky, very rocky, but we get on well together now.
It was a shock to her to think that her son was in a relationship with an older woman who had her own son, and, where was Mark going with this?
I never really saw Mark as a father figure, saw him more as an older brother. We played on the Xbox quite a bit. My and Mark's partnership has just told me just never give in to anything. People say no a lot of the times, but they've never taken no for an answer.
Mark and I kept our relationship under wraps purely because I just didn't think it was the right message if I was going to talk to a team boss or a sponsor. If I rocked in there saying, oh, my partner, my boyfriend, it just sounded naff. I knew the sport well enough to stand my own ground and represent him well. It was an incredibly tough struggle during those early years.
I was working as a racing instructor, so that was £43 a day. It was very important that, we both contributed to just getting the groceries in.
1998 was the most distinguished year.
Probably the first real big breakthrough for Mark was in his early 20s when he was signed by Mercedes in sports cars.
Now I'm a professional, so now I'm actually getting paid. So my first contract was around 70,000 German marks, which that's good. That is sensational.
Mark Webber's Mercedes is the #1 qualified for this race. Mark Webber, how are you feeling at the moment?
In most people's eyes, he had arrived. He had suddenly made it. He was going to be this famous person and whatever.
You know the whole of Australia are behind it, so go get him. Thank you very much.
There was a girl on the scene, someone that Mike used to go to school with, and he did. He did take up with her for a little while.
There was a lot of things going on. I was, pressing on with a career. Well, we had, a tricky moment. It happened.
To be honest, I was more angry about the whole thing going off the rails in terms of his career, because I just knew this was so the wrong thing. He could not afford to have a girlfriend who's living back in Australia when he's trying to, pursue a professional career in Europe. They decided they didn't want me doing his management anymore. That was a bit of a kick. I thought, right, okay, so that's how it works, is it? I've done all this hard work, got you to, into a professional racing seat, and now you don't need me. Okay, let's see. Let's just see. And of course, long and short of it is he realised that he actually did need me in his life. And that's when I get the call, I want to come home.
Certainly a bit of an uppercut to myself, but that's, it's fine. I don't have too many regrets for that. We patched it back up and got on with it pretty quickly.
Welcome to Le Mans for the 67th running of the 24 Hours of Le Mans.
I never got in the car and thought I was going to hurt myself. It's not that you're immortal, but you feel pretty much fearless.
I know what the dangers are, and you just don't. It's an area you don't actually talk about. In '99, the focus was now to be just purely on Le Mans, which is obviously this mecca of car races. And unfortunately, it just went spectacularly wrong.
In that long straight, the car got a little bit of air, got a little light, got a little air underneath it, and next minute it took off.
It flipped. You literally are now in a low sort of altitude plane, if you like, but my life did flash before me. I thought about 3 women. It was my sister, my mother and Annie. You hope they're not watching and you don't want them to go through any sort of, heartache, I suppose.
It was about an hour and a half before I got to the hospital.
I haven't told you what the reason was?
No, I have no idea at this stage. I didn't really know what I was going to find. Difficult.
Have you spoken to Mark? I mean, how was he?
I walked in and he was all right. He said, Dad, I flipped 3 times. Went back and I told the people on the pit wall at Mercedes, this is bullshit, this cannot happen. And so that was that response, and I guess, to be honest, I wasn't very impressed.
There was no still shots, there was no vision. And I think it was hard for people to accept what took place. And I said, well, I know exactly what's happened, guys. The thing I'm telling you now, it flipped. I had the day off and then went back out, and then I had a similar type of accident the next lap out. I just said to myself, I don't want any pain. I just want it over fast. So I'm not going to be lucky twice.
Der Silberpfeil mit Mark Webber am Steuer hebt ab, überschlägt sich.
Oh, it's the Mark Webber car. Yes, again.
But I walked away.
Straight away it's go. It's 4 o'clock on Saturday. The Le Mans 24 Hours.
To the race itself, an almost identical accident happens to his teammate. Miraculously, he survives. Mercedes pull down the garage door, and suddenly Mark's career is at a crossroads once again.
Mentally, I was pretty scarred from those shunts because I trusted that car like my mother, and it really did knock me around. I was in a pretty bad place. I didn't step in a car for 6 months.
Okay, Alan, you can take your hands off your eyes now and watch your son win.
It was another 3 years of trying to get the money together and racing in other categories that would ultimately lead to an opportunity with the Minardi Formula One team, who were the bottom of the rung, if you like, in Formula One, but it was a start.
It's not an easy thing to arrive in Formula One, so I'm at base camp at Everest. Now I've got to get to the top of Everest, so I'll do the best I can.
We knew the cars were marginal. We knew it was going to be a tough weekend. And then, of course, the famous start, all the cars falling over each other. And so you get excited because I saw both of ours get through. And you're thinking, it's just not possible. Could he possibly score a point? And when he crossed the line, I mean, that was just probably one of the greatest days of my life.
Australia's Mark Webber was 5th on debut.
In the end, yeah, got 5th place was incredible. And Stoddy said, forget the 3-race contract, you can stay in for the whole season, which was, yeah, just fantastic.
Without doubt, it was one of the best, most memorable debuts ever. It was David and Goliath performance, set him up for a career in Formula One.
It was a toast of the town, and I remember then that we were kind of like, we weren't really together in most people's eyes, and it was a bit of a strange sensation, sort of like, wow, you just achieved this, but I couldn't really be too emotional about it. Then I suppose gradually, yeah, it came out. No one wrote headlines about it, but we were just more comfortable about being open about it, and that's how it really sort of evolved.
So after Minardi, there were opportunities at Jaguar and Williams. Both had fast cars at times, but not cars consistently capable of giving him wins. It's a physically demanding game. You need to be almost superhuman in fitness terms. And that is, in some ways, what set him apart from the rest.
My size and my weight was not certainly ideal for F1. I had to work hard on that, on the fitness side, and being very lean and make sure that my weight was very low.
Is it redneck politics?
There is a huge amount of selfishness that is needed. And it does take its toll probably on the people the closest to you.
I'm not, these guys,
he couldn't have a drink, he couldn't have a decent meal, he couldn't be out late because there was always this routine.
I'm sort of kicking around the table and I'm like, you know, come on, like, I want to go home, you know, I want to train tomorrow.
Webber staged his annual Tasmanian multi-sport event to keep fit during Formula One's off-season, raising money for charity at the same time.
Mark invited me to the Wilderness Challenge on the west coast of Tasmania, which I thought pretty cruisy sort of day. It'd be nice to get out and check a bit of Tasmania out. 24 hours later, I was regretting that decision and my body was just in meltdown.
Yeah, good slog, but, you know, it's a hard ride. I think a lot of people are going to be on the ropes, to be honest.
It was the 2008 Mark Webber Challenge, and they met a car come in the opposite direction, and he broke his leg in the process.
Webber was rushed to hospital for surgery on his right leg.
The timing wasn't exactly spot on because there was a new teammate to contend with, and his name was Sebastian Vettel.
Mark had been with Red Bull for 2 years when this young German Sebastian Vettel arrived. He'd come up through their junior development program and was kind of part of the family when he turned up.
He was a good kid, and yeah, Mark liked him, and yeah, it's going to be a great partnership.
It was clear he was a talent. I didn't know actually how good he was going to be at that stage.
A lot of time has gone by, and a lot of things have happened since.
The golden rule in any motor racing team is to beat your teammate. Mark and Vettel, they used to push each other.
Mark and Sebastian had this rivalry, and in some ways it was a good thing to begin with. It spurred the team on to some terrific results.
After 130 races, there was no holding back the emotion as Mark Webber won the German Grand Prix.
My first Grand Prix victory was the proudest moment probably in my career.
At 32, Webber became the first Australian to win a Formula One race since Alan Jones in 1981.
my father to be there for my first win was super emotional. It was funny because I think he had a steak the night before and he lost his front tooth. He said, mate, you won't believe it, I lost my front tooth. I said, oh, whatever, bullshit. Because he's always, he's a practical joker. So he said, no, Dad said, I've got no front tooth. So of all the days when he wanted to smile like a Cheshire cat, obviously he couldn't.
Mark Webber couldn't have been happier winning his second.
2010, it just went on a nice roll for 3 or 4 races. It was just brilliant. You couldn't do anything wrong.
The first Australian to win the Monaco Grand Prix since Jack Brabham in 1959.
We got the impression that Sebastian wasn't happy with how things were going. This old Aussie was beating him and it wasn't really the way it was supposed to be.
There was a difficult period that started off, I think, in the Grand Prix of Turkey when Sebastian and Mark collided.
With a teammate like this, who needs enemies?
I was getting ready to try to overtake him, and then we touched.
Both say that they'll point the finger at the other until they go to their graves, but most thought it was Sebastian that made the risky move, and then, amazingly, one of the senior team figures came out and backed Vettel.
The issues started to come because of poor team management, really, letting him get away with things. I just think, really? You're going to let him get away with that?
Well, there's always that perception that Vettel had better treatment, for want of a better word. The team is based in England, but it's Austrian and German money that sponsor it.
I've just won the previous 2 Grand Prix from start to finish, and then the new rear wing arrives and goes over the other side of the garage, and I know for a fact the mechanics were furious.
You were never going to keep both drivers, totally 100% happy, and sometimes, as a team principal, you have to make difficult decisions.
We just think, was there a bit of an agenda going on? They were very keen to keep him probably a little bit happier, just because, again, I was an old dog. I was a guy that was sort of probably supposed to be a little bit washed up.
Mark Webber isn't happy. The Australian crashed out on the saturated track, and that may have ended his bid for this year's Formula One World Championship.
Seb, after 2010, had an edge on Mark that never went away, sadly, for Mark.
Formula One has a new world champion, but not the one that Australians wanted. 23-year-old German Sebastian Vettel won.
Yeah, I would love to have, of course, got the championship and had the number 1 on the car, but it wasn't to be. And
I think Mark was good for one world championship. I think he had that drive and desire and the talent, but that ruthlessness and, I don't give a shit about anyone, so that's definitely not him.
Formula One driver Mark Webber is heading home to consider his future.
2013 Malaysian Grand Prix was definitely the low point. The team had a coded message, Multi-21, which basically said that after the final round of pit stops, whichever of the team drivers was in front, they would maintain station, and that's how it would be until the end of the race. And Seb kind of went rogue. He went and did his own thing, overtook Mark, broke the rule, and went on to win the Grand Prix. And Webber was fuming about it.
The German took the victory and the championship lead.
Furious with Seb. A little bit, but just the whole scenario was just, how do we get ourselves in this position?
That was the lowest of the low. I think I've seen probably everything over the years, but that one, I would have had a lot of difficulty not getting out of that car and thumping Sebastian.
So we got off the podium and, he just came over and said, we need to talk, He said, I've just f***ed up. I f***ed up, mate. I f***ed up so bad, And I said, mate, well, let's just talk. Let's talk next week. I don't know who spoke to him between Malaysia and China, but we had a discussion in China and the discussion didn't go well. And he just said that, he had massive respect for me as a driver and not much as a person. So that really affected the relationship, obviously. At the time, we were hardly stand the side of each other. The team after Multi-21 were, disappointed, no question about it. They were shown how toothless they were. They couldn't handle us two out there, obviously, on the track, which shouldn't be like that. They just needed something to change. So, I helped that decision for them and left.
Australian driver Mark Webber has bid an emotional farewell to Formula One at the Brazilian Grand Prix.
The day of the race started to hit me. It was like, this is it. I must say, I actually welled up a little bit. I was like, the eyes were sort of like, were full. And before the race started, I'm just like, okay, yeah, this was emotional. It's about to finish. So
Webber finished second behind his teammate and bitter rival Sebastian Vettel.
I thought I'd take my helmet off because we have our helmets on all the time, but it's just a thank you, really. Say goodbye that way.
I think Mark came out of his F1 career with his head held high. You know, that was more important probably than winning the title. I think his code of ethics, you know, his sportsmanship, all that was actually far more important.
It was all clean. It was all as I wanted it to be, and that's why I can look back and say, yeah, I'm proud of what I achieved. Seb's trophy cabinet came out of it better than mine, but I'm not jealous of him at all, of what he achieved and what he's got. Time is a healer. A few glasses of red wine here and there, and the grudges will be going.
Seb and I are getting on pretty well, actually. We had a good chat in Monaco. We've caught up a few times. It's interesting to see, from his perspective, how he saw things and how I saw things. And yeah, obviously we have a lot of respect for each other. He said, yeah, I mean, we all look back and say, well, we have done things differently. Absolutely, yes.
Coffee's going to be my friend today.
Oh, I reckon. Yeah.
Maddie, it doesn't matter what driver you are, what track you're at, what category you're in. Hang on.
Mark's dabbling in a bit of media, but the racing bug was still there, and it's kind of come full circle. He's gone back to sports cars, and this time with Porsche.
Didn't put a scratch on the car all year until the last race of the year, where I got tangled up with a back marker in Brazil.
Oh my goodness me!
The crash in Brazil, I was watching it on TV and saw it all unfold.
It is a Porsche.
I was thinking, well, whoever's in that, they're toast. Absolutely, no way.
It is the 20 car. That is Mark Webber's car.
So I thought, okay, that's it. That is really it this time. His luck has run out.
They're listening to see if Mark's talking to them, and that's why the concerned faces.
Luke, I called out to him. I said, there's been a horrible, terrible accident. It's Mark. I can't watch it.
It may have been that Mark was already on the inside and just collected the...
My mum was pretty hysterical at the time. She was saying some pretty strong things, saying, I don't know what I'm going to do without him. And I was trying to, console her and say everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be okay. You can't see him moving. So, yeah, that was tough.
That's Mark is waving his hands.
But until, saw him on the stretch with his thumbs up, it was horrendous. It was probably, the slowest 20 minutes of my life, sort of watching it on TV.
I had injuries in the past, but never really anything to do with the big head knock. I was worried that that might have been it, but I tested very, very well in Bahrain pretty quickly, and yeah, we're back.
It's been a wonderful, wonderful ride that I've had. I've loved it all my life, and to be around these fellows, and it's been a dream come true.
With Ann, we had an incredible journey to get to where we got to. We've been through a load together, professionally and privately, and I think that yeah, it was I would say a pretty handy team effort.
You moved around, I've gone flick and break his skin in his lip straight away. But he's still talking to me, so that's the main.
I suppose we're just soulmates. At the end of the day, I think that's probably what you would say. We're soulmates.
Porsche thing at Le Mans, so yeah.
It's our story. That's what we set out to do, and we did it.
So what did you think about qualifying today? It was all worked out pretty well?
That's the last thing I want to talk about. Friggin' racing.
drivers.